spot. It's a scary
If you're
spot.
happy there, it's fine, but no, you guys can sit over.
Want to come over, Nicole?
You'll see you
You
on,
can double share it.
you'll see you on the screen then,
Thank you.
your boss will know you're here.
He can identify my bald head from this video.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to hide when I laugh.
So we'll call the meeting back to order and there's no set issue here. So I wanted to have you guys in to chat about where you thought things were and we got really big issues that it's kind of late to deal with, but there's going to be a committee, a conference, and maybe some things could get changed there. If we have a person in our committee on that, will be on that committee conference, I hope. You don't screw up in the next few days.
Did you find any money under the couch cushions?
So I know one big issue that didn't fare very as well as it should have was the 10 million and I don't know, Hanson, you want to comment on that? It's at 2.3, I believe, this, but the issue that, some of the issue that caused that was the 6.9 million didn't come over in the budget from the House for, I think it simply got forgotten about, or they thought it was in because it was part of the supplemental. But anyways, that's where we are on that one. So that is in and of course for you guys to figure out how to pay it out. So do you want to comment on that, Anson?
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. Anson Tebbets with the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. Senator, I really haven't had a chance to take a deep dive into the budget yet and look at it thoroughly. I know there's some differences between the House version and the Senate version. We have been working behind the scenes, knowing that this program may be included in the budget. So working with the Dairy Division and the Ag Development Division, we've been working behind the scenes in case this does cross the finish line. We know the House did not include it, so I know you folks in the Senate have to work out your differences with the House, and I'm talking about the organic program. Of course, we did put together a $10 million program for really forward thinking on the processing. The House did include, I think, $5 million, and you folks had to lower it a little bit. So that's in play. I know there's some other programs that are there, but I really haven't had a chance to, look at all the language and so forth. But we are ready to, as you get to conference committee, as the administration gets to weigh all the programs across state government, we'll stand ready to advise you on where we're at. But I think it's a little premature for us right now to comment on anything. I haven't really had a chance to look at the budget at all yet. I think you're on the floor this week with it, maybe in the Senate. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we did a run through yesterday. Jane did to explain it to the caucus of the whole, and it'll be up for action this afternoon for second reading. Second reading,
okay. Yeah, so we stand ready to help you in your deliberations, and we know that there's a lot of things in play, not only at the Agency of Agriculture, but across state government with so many programs needing investments. But we hope agriculture, of course, will be at the front of the line in making some investments. The processing one for maple meat and produce, it's forward thinking. It came out of the Commission of Ag, Governor's Commission on the Future of Agriculture. It's a program, first of its kind, one-time opportunity. Of course, we asked for 10 million. We know that there's other things in play as well, but we'll work through it, and wherever we land, we land. But I know we've got a couple more weeks before we land on a final budget, and we stand ready to support whatever happens at the end of the game here.
Yeah, well, it's the 10 million, House had it at 5, and to make everything work, we had to drop it to 2.3. But I'm sure that the House will be pushing to get that back up a little if they can. Richie, I would think is gonna be on that conference, if you've been told yet or no. But,
Before anything happens,
but the maple, the maple meat and produce, I think, took the blunt of the hit. And, I think it's important that we try to get as much back there as we can, because at this value, it stays at 2.3. You might, I don't know, if you talked at all about maybe instead of launching a new program, you load that into working lands for grants for those 3 different groups to try to achieve what you thought we could do with if it was at 10.
Yeah, we haven't discussed that, Senator, but I see where you're heading on that. It would be maybe a little easier to manage. The downside of that is it may take a little longer to get the money out the door if it goes through the Working Lands. The Working Lands is an independent body that evaluates and scores all the projects. And our thinking on this Future of Ag component was it would be a separate program within the agency, and we could kick it out with just working through the agency and through our granting program. But I understand where you're coming from, knowing that it may not be at the level that we had hoped for, and it might be a little easier to manage it through the Working Lands. But we can work through that. My understanding also is Working Lands did not receive the full ask that we asked for, which was, I think we were hoping for a $4 million program this year in Working Lands, and that took a haircut as well. So. We're open to suggestions, but we're hoping we can, continue to see a little bit more money in all of these programs before we get to the end of the line.
Yeah, well, Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just kind of curious because we really haven't had, and the good news is it hasn't been any negative information regarding the organic folks for, a month or 2 here. I guess what I'm asking is the 6.9 still necessary to that full extent? How are things progressing in that sector? Are they better? Are they worse? Are they the same? Do you have any kind of feel for that?
I think they're the same. There's continues to be, stress in that area. The agency has been working on the organic component for a couple of years now. First, when Horizon decided it was going to leave the market in the Northeast. So we put up the task force and we worked through, and working with some private handlers, we were able to get markets for them. We've also been able to do some infrastructure improvements for the organic dairy community, which has been helpful because to hit those markets and secure those markets, they had to make some changes in their infrastructure on some of their farms. And of course, the legislature also kicked in some dollars last year. So we've been engaged with the organic community. We know they're under incredible stress because of the price of their inputs that they've had, and they've not seen a price increase on the milk side. So I would say it's probably the same as the temperature is probably just about the same as it was back in January.
Okay, I didn't know if the feed costs have stabilized in any regard or even gotten cheaper.
I think it's gotten a little better, but certainly they're not out of the hole yet on that particular market.
Okay, thank you, Anson.
Yeah.
And so I think your dairy people are pretty well geared up to how they're gonna handle the outflow of that money to the farms. And I think we got the language pretty decent in the bill that, so that if you had an organic guy that switched to conventional during the year, they would still get paid for their organic milk at the higher rate. But as long as they were still milking at the end of the year, they would be eligible to get a payment. If they milk halfway through the year and then decided to sell, those guys aren't gonna get reimbursed for the 6 months or whatever time they were milking, and that's all written in, and I think that was relayed to us so that it would be clear for you folks of who would get paid and who wouldn't. It's been since last winter, so.
Yeah, and I don't know if Steve Collier, I know Steve has been working on some language, and I don't know if that the latest version Steve's is in there. I don't know if it's appropriate. Maybe Steve could comment on the latest on that.
Yeah, thank you. That's okay. Good morning, everyone. Steve Collier from the Agency of Agriculture. So I was actually just talking to Michael O'Grady about this issue because we did propose some small language tweaks that are not in the current language, but on the point, they're not, it's not in the current language and they're pretty small, but the one from our perspective, the most important one is that right now there's a 6.9 million allocation. And we think that's the right amount. We've done the homework to find out what's needed, but you never know if it's exactly accurate. So if we got 7.4 million in requests and we only had 6.9 million to pay it, we'd be in trouble. We'd be $500,000 short. We do not anticipate that, but we wanted some language that just said we pay the grants until the money's expended. And on the flip side of that, if we don't get all of the grant requests that we anticipate, we'd like to be able to reallocate that money to working lands or to some other program that you all felt was appropriate. So that to me is the biggest one, because the 6.9 million is we think a very solid estimate, but it's still an estimate. The other one is on the point that you were just raising, and I did talk to Mr. O'Grady about it, and he suggested he would talk to you, Senator Starr, about that, and he has that language. But the other issue that you just raised, the way that I read what is in the current bill is that in order to be eligible, you have to be shipping organic through the end of the year, 2022. So in other words, it's the way I read it, it says you have to be shipping organic milk through the end of the year, but you only have to be but you only have to be producing now at the time of application, either organic or conventional. So meaning that, and I'm not sure that it doesn't sound like that's what you intended at all, that you could switch over in 2022, but I would suggest that it would be easy to do. A little tweak to that language to make it clear that if you transition at any time during the calendar year 2022 from organic to conventional, that you could still be eligible. But right now, the way
that was our intention.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to talk to Mike O'Grady about it, but I don't think that's what it says. Because it says if you were shipping organic through the end of calendar year 2022, that's one of the eligibility criteria. So if you wanted it to be during 2022, that's different potentially. So that's along those same lines, though, in terms of the eligibility. This would be easy to fix anyway, if you can, as long as you can get access to change it. But the other things that we were suggesting substantively were not everyone ships organic milk. We have some processors who process it themselves and sell it. And so rather than using the term shipping, we wanted to create the carve out where if you're producing your own milk and selling it, then you'd also be eligible. And then the other little piece, and this is all, just a few words of language change, is we have some seasonal producers.
That should be allowed.
Well, and the issue is right now it says if you're shipping through the end of 2022, but seasonal producers stop before the end of 2022. So we suggested these changes to Mr. O'Grady, but not, I wasn't aware that you wanted people who transitioned during 2022 from organic to conventional to be covered. So I didn't suggest that language change, but again, that would be simple to do.
That should be in.
Yeah.
In the bill.
It's not my read, maybe I'm not reading it right, but that's, to me, because it says through the end of the year, like if you stop in July, that's not through the end of the year, because it does say shipping organic milk through the end of calendar year 2022. That language is a paraphrase, but that's,
We'll
Yeah.
get Michael in.
yeah, okay.
Yep. Do you have anything?
Yeah, it's, would be helpful to, of the 10 million, if there was breakout of the items there versus working lands, and if there is in a negotiation room to move, where and what in the pecking order would be important. Break the 10 million up and what's the top priority in those expenditures versus working lands and where you want to go.
I think that's a question best for the secretary.
I didn't mean that, I meant that for the agency, and it would be helpful to know.
Sure.
Did you hear that question?
Yeah, as we get into the negotiating phase, if I understood the question from the senator was, as we get into the negotiations, we need to provide you with some ranking of where our priorities would land in the working lands as far as allocating the dollars.
Working lands versus the 10 million that you asked for, is the slaughterhouse piece, is the produce piece, is what you wanted to do in Maple, how did they all relate? And if I broke them out into pieces, if we came up in a negotiation and we were arguing over a $500,000, $1 million or two, what's the pecking order? And what makes sense for costing? There's no sense just dumping stuff and not knowing what we would be helping you do.
Understood. Thank you.
The House had in their bill, I don't know, 400,000 maybe, or 350,000 for small farms. And that got shaved back.
Well, the House had, instead of 10,
350.
they had 5 million
For the big project.
for the big projects. So, and we were at 2.3. As we're looking at that, if, I just trying to create a picture, what, when you're trying to create a negotiating position, what's important? And what's a decent amount for different pieces?
That I would expect the House is going to be pushing to try to get that haircut that we gave small farms back up $100,000 or so. And we anticipated that when we made the decision to move that money upstream to the Sustainable Jobs Fund, because we had that down to 200. They wanted 4, it was down to 2, and we got it back to 3. So
well, the question is, in that box, would the House suggest that we cut the 6.9 for organic farmers to fill their small farm? But I mean, just where do you want to go?
yeah, so it'll be helpful, to get your perspective. We'll have Michael come over with that language change on the big money.
Well, and the other question is the House Ag Committee going to weigh in with their Appropriations Committee members?
Well, we gotta get Dave down here can talk to him about.
Well, it'd be interesting to know what they're gonna do.
Well, it's a new crew. So Abby, how'd you guys, your working lines didn't do too good, but there's room to move that up if we can find any more money, that's for sure.
6:30 usually.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Yeah, Abby Willard, Agency of Agriculture for the record. Yeah, I appreciate the question from Senator Westman around our priorities if we were to rank them. And I'm sure that we can get more of that clarification. I think there's many similarities between the 10 million and the priorities of working lands. And there are a few differences that we can, better articulate to this committee if that would be helpful. Part of the value of an investment in working lands is that it's an established program that producers are accustomed to applying for, and it captures both agriculture and forestry and wood manufacturing. So that's a unique factor within the working lands program. It supports businesses and service providers, which is also a unique difference and priority of the working lands program. And as we've shared with this committee and others previously, it's incredibly oversubscribed. So we turn down very high quality and relevant applications every year because we receive over $10 million in demand, and we have somewhere between 2 million and 4 million in recent times, as high as 5 million in this 2 years ago in an appropriation. So that's the circumstance around the working lands. It would be great to see it returned to the governor's recommend, acknowledging that even $4 million for the working lands program is still much lower than our anticipated kind of receipt of eligible applicants. So again, I don't anticipate we're going to see less than the 10 million that we've seen over the last 3 years of requests come in. But it's nice that that program also supports the forestry sector and wood manufacturing businesses, which are really critical to our working landscape. And some of those resources also go to the technical assistance community, which was, continues to be identified as an area that agriculture needs support in, is to help businesses access business plans, access, production assistance and other support for their business growth. So yeah, that would be great to see those resources restored. I would just say really quickly on the 10 million vision. So we articulated sort of what some of the eligible uses were that we imagined, and it's really focused on larger one-time infrastructure investments. So that's a bit of a differentiation between the 10 million and the working lands program. So it's really looking at where can we make infrastructure investments in the supply chain that supports on-farm and ag business diversification. As we look at how we're supporting and hospicing the dairy industry as we help grow and develop an emerging diversified agricultural community in the state.
That's very helpful. It just, when you're not in the trenches doing the work, in the pecking order, when you're in a conference committee dealing with it, it would be nice to have what's the priorities and match the numbers, because we sit in the legislature, we don't do the work.
Yeah, I hear your request.
I just want to dovetail on the Senator Westman's statement. That's sort of what I was asking when I brought up the organic piece. I mean, I'm guessing that in a conference committee, and hopefully we will have one of our members on that, it's always nice to know which segments of the budget are in cement, if you will, that are firm. And Anson mentioned the 6.9 seems to still be a legitimately good number that would represent the needs of the organic sector. But we were able to get Salvation Farms, what they requested. The conservation districts also had a haircut. The fencing was okay, as I recall. The DMC went in pretty much with what we needed to keep that going. So it's kind of like having a deck of cards, and that's where Senator Westman hopefully will be. But he'll have that knowledge from the agency as to what absolutely would be number one, and then following that, number 2, number 3, number 4. I think that's very valuable to sort of have that strategy if you're gonna go in and try to negotiate. So I think that's what we're all sort of asking about is we're gonna fight for it, but we need to know which ones we might be able to, get better and which ones we might not be able to help much with.
Well, Senator, we can go back and that's very helpful advice. So we'll get the team together on our end and put some priorities down for you before you hit the table in negotiating with the House.
Yeah, that won't be till next week or after. The other question I had was not so much on the budget. But have you looked over the projections for the DMC to see if, is it projected that that's gonna pay out much this year or not much? And because it's important that the conventional guys, we got enough to cover their premiums, but if the premiums don't raise any money, it isn't gonna help them much. But if the premiums will raise some money, any idea on what the feds are projecting?
Well, I think that's important that you've included the payments for the insurance program, the federal program that's run through the USDA. I think it's important that you've included those because that will support the conventional dairy market. Things are a little so in the pricing of dairy now, and the price of feed has not really gone down as well as fuel. So I think they will receive payments, and the projections that we're seeing, they likely will see some payments next year. So I think it's important that money's included in there, and I think all the farmers are appreciative of that. That's included. We continue to get calls at the agency about that. And we continue to process applications as well, working with FSA.
Yeah.
Senator, if I can add on to that, I think I just recently read that they're projecting the difference to be $6, the payout to be at 6 on the DMC. So the range is 4 to 9, right? And I think they're projecting at 6. I think that was in our latest dairy synopsis. But.
So that means a total payment versus what we paid the premiums, the gap is what?
I think the projection is about $6 is where the DMC coverage will trigger.
That's fine for you to tell me $6. In the overall, somebody that's not dealing with this, what's that for payments in both back to Vermont farmers?
I don't know the total, it's per farm. It's where the coverage kicks in is the difference between your cost of inputs and your milk price. And so there's a range where you can buy it if they get too close together. So in other words,
I get, it's an insurance policy.
Right.
I'm just trying to be able to, when I'm sitting at a table and basically none of us are dairy farmers.
right,
And I get to say, the investment we made last year was this, and this is what the help was back to our farmers. How do I put it in terms of people that don't do this every day?
so I don't know that number for you. I'm sure we can give you an estimate, but the point you can certainly say right now is that the insurance premiums that you funded will pay dividends to the farms, because if the coverage range is outside the pricing, I don't have a number.
And quite frankly, for me and everything we did, that's the most important thing that we put in the budget.
Yeah.
The last good year that paid out was, I think, up around $64 million.
Right. So if I can say that we got payouts of 64 million and we put basically insurance payments
Right.
of what?
Understood. Yeah.
How much was the insurance payment that year? And
Right.
that's not a good way to put it, is insurance payment, but that's what I look at it like.
Well, I mean, we're a lot more than that. We're making good use of this few dollars.
Yes,
Yeah.
but you need to, if you have 6 people that aren't getting a milk check.
Yeah.
They're gonna, well, what does this mean?
No, the ROI on that was very good. There's no
Yes.
doubt about that, yeah. What was the gap last year, do you know? That might help you
Last
kind of
year
figure it out.
Yeah, just
Like a couple of.
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know if whether
No,
your secretary
I don't
knows, it's higher, the milk price was higher last year than this year, so
Yeah.
I
It was
believe that
small last
So
yeah.
it's small, yeah.
And it's a 1.5 million investment that you made for the year. This is bolstering that,
right,
but yeah,
so if I,
right,
and so
understood.
if I put in a few $100,000 this year and
Generate, because this year is projected to be better than a lot of years on the paper.
And part of the challenge, Senator Westman, maybe, and I don't have great familiar, Evie and Laura Ginsburg are experts in dairy margin coverage, but even though you pay the premiums, the farmer still elects, as I understand it, how much coverage they want to buy. So they don't necessarily buy the greatest coverage, and even though hopefully they do, hopefully they- hopefully they do when you're providing that reimbursement, but whether or not they are, I don't know for certain.
So,
No, we'll get you more
yeah,
information.
from my point of view, for little or nothing, we are able to produce a level of security for our farms that's huge but when somebody says, what does this mean? I need to be able to answer them in terms of that is a little more concrete than.
Yeah, understood.
yeah, $1.5 million should generate about 15, at minimum 15.
And that's exactly
Any firm
what I
that
need to
up
feel comfortable saying.
with the projections, but that's all we have. And they've been feeling since the Wellington one. Catherine does pretty good. Anything
May
else?
I just offer just a tiny bit on this topic?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, Senator. I agree that I think we can get you some better estimates. I think the price difference anticipated for 24 and 25 is anticipated to be less than the price difference was in 22 and 23. So how much different? I think we can look to some of the futures data and get you an estimate. And I just want to clarify and make sure we're all clear that the 415,000 that you've identified for premium insurance payments will only cover through 23. If we were looking at covering any additional dairy margin coverage payments in 24 and 25, our estimate is that it would be another $3.2 million to do that.
Yeah.
Based on, again, and we can get you a better summary of what that price difference is. But again, the 415,000 just covers 22 and 23 applications that we have received and or are anticipating receiving. To continue the program would be an additional price tag.
When does 23 end, at the federal calendar date or our fiscal calendar date? Or what calendar year are what months our calendar year ending in?
That is a good question that I don't know the answer to. Sorry.
Because we got 3 different ones, right? We
Yeah.
could use the regular calendar date, and then we'll be back in January and be able to deal with that. But if it's the state's calendar year, that ends in June. If it's a Fed's calendar year, I think that's October.
Yeah.
So, but I guess,
and there are also deadlines when they have to sign up as well. So that's the other factor.
I think that's already gone by with.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, so if we, when we come back in January, we might have to do some more money in the supplemental if we're messed up on, but we'll have to deal with that. Because those calendar years can really mess you up. There any other issues that we need to talk about as far as the budget goes, or?
No, I think we've got some direction, and we'll go back to the office and get some of the clarifications and give you some simple blueprints as you enter your negotiations. One thing I did want to just update you, just a quick follow-up. I know you folks started it last year, and we had that working group on the new and beginning farmer resources. So we've stood up a web page that offers a one-stop shopping for new and beginning farmers, because we are seeing some growth out there of people wanting to farm. And as you discovered last year, and it gave us some direction, and we worked with the Vermont Housing Conservation Board. So we've got a one-stop shopping places where all the resources are available now for folks to go. And if they want to start, or they're a new and beginning farmer, everything from land access to business planning, new farmer courses, grants and loans, veteran farmers, health and wellness, agronomy, it's all in one place now. So it gives someone a starting point where they can go and work on that. So that's been completed, and we started that last year, and hopefully that will give some direction to some folks that are wanting to farm in Vermont.
Oh, that's good, Anderson. Yeah, when we had Farm Day and, Small Farm Day, they back last year, they were saying that we had that, it would be most helpful. So that's great that you got that accomplished.
Yeah, the Gina on our team and the folks over at the Housing Conservation Board spent the summer just talking with everyone that's working in agriculture. And so I'll pass that along. I'll pass the link along to you folks so you have it. So if you have someone that comes to you and wants to know where to go, you can distribute it, so you can take a look and poke around it. But it's quite comprehensive, and it's a lot of information and a lot of opportunity, I think, for young and new and beginning farmers.
Well, that'd be appreciated and helpful.
Yep.
Do you have anything?
No, I do.
No. Well, we got you here. We've been wanting to give you a chance.
You should tell Senator Westman something about the budget.
I don't have anything to say.
Any other?
I'm just wondering where any of these language changes take place. Is that in a conference committee or is that on the floor?
In the conference committee,
Yeah, it's easiest place.
if I get the language, it's easy.
Richie will have his list.
I will just add, the benefit of being remote is I can do research at the same time that I visit with you. So the dairy margin coverage program is based on calendar year. So it would be through, we would be making payments based on through the calendar year.
31/26, yeah.
That's good to know. And so then in January, we would know if feds are gonna promote that into the future, and maybe even have some, have some projections on how the pricing's going, and we could deal with that in the supplemental. So, well, that's good. I'm glad. I was glad to hear that wasn't gonna run out in June.
Well, and to tag on to that, if I may, we're hoping they're gonna create a similar program for the organic farmers as well.
Yeah.
Because the organic farmers can enroll now, but the pricing doesn't work for their model. So if they create that separate program, we might have those, might know something about that as well, which would be great.
It's the other thing, we've been checking with the feds on the 100 million that the federal government set aside for organics, and we can't get, because we figured if they were gonna pay 2, we might be able to get away with paying only 3, and then that would give us more money to put into your 10 million deal. And but
Can I? So you, just in the thinking of what you just said, Abby, the 400,000, because it becomes part of the budget that starts in July. And it's the budget year that goes to the end of June a year from this June. Does that mean the 400,000 only covers through the end of this December?
till December.
It's a good question, Senator Westman, and I think What I can tell you from the team that is managing the dairy margin coverage payments is that we are anticipating that whatever is passed in the fiscal year 24 state budget will be expended within a matter of weeks and months,
Okay,
because there's already the applications and the insurance coverage that's been paid for by the dairy industry that we would be reimbursed, we would be covering that difference payment on. So yes, it may be able to cover through December, but the funds will be expended either even before the budget passes in concept or within a few months following.
So, yeah, so to Senator Westman's point, that's one we don't want to, I mean, we want to keep that. We don't want to pull the rug out at the last minute on that. So that's one that you might want to not be able to.
yeah, that,
Oh,
for
yeah,
me,
you're right.
that is
That might
my
be number
number
one.
one
Yeah.
priority
Yeah.
of all of the items in this. That's my number one priority.
I mean, it's not a lot of money necessarily in the scope of things.
No, but it
Still.
is it's my number one priority. Just because the number's smaller doesn't mean it's not.
I agree.
Right, and I think we appreciate that. We know that, again, these dairy margin coverage payments go to organic and conventional dairy farms, and that we will probably have demand for these dollars in the coming weeks, and we will have to put out some sort of a message to the industry that we have expended our current and existing allocation, and we're going to hold applications until the budget is passed or FY24 dollars are made available. And so to your point, again, yeah, there's a sensitive communication with the industry around these payments, and I understand why that would be a top priority for this committee, and I suspect similarly at the agency.
And but I wasn't clear from you. I got the going out for 24 and 25 is 3 some, but if for the calendar year beginning in January, to do for 24, how much is 24?
I think my understanding of the estimate was about 1.6 million per year. So 1.6 for 24 and 1.6 for 25. So that's the 3.2.
So we don't have to
Right.
capture a lot of money to one pay.
I got it.
Anything else from you? folks?
No, I think we're good. So
Yeah.
we'll go back and do some homework and make sure you have your information so when you need it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just one update you may be interested in, you may already know, but the House committee has been working on the municipal stormwater language that you all passed. Remember, originally you passed language saying towns can't essentially double charge these farms. And then finance changed that to a study, but the House Ag Committee's been working on that, and we've been working with them in DEC, and it looks like they're gonna change it back. So at conference, you should have an opportunity to actually make it so that towns can that towns can no longer charge this fee. So hopefully we don't have to postpone it a year, but we'll see.
That is a ripple.
Yeah. The Intervale was in yesterday, and they said that collectively, or one farm in the Intervale was in, and they said that collectively for, I forget if you said 5 or 6 farms that were there, it was $6,000 annually that they pay for, according to them, for stormwater that they can't even access because it's a
They can't.
half a mile away. But, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good information. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Is there still gonna be a study or they just strike that?
If this changes, then no, the law would just be clarified, it would be a non-issue.
Well, Michael was right.
Right, yeah.
I don't know, we got a bill that's coming up, well, it's already gone to the House, right?
Which one?
The one with the, looking at the RAPs and that. That's all, it went through it got stuck in a bill toward the end of the week, last 2 weeks ago, or last 2 weeks ago, and last week Natural Resources loaded that in a bill. So you guys would have to study with ANR, the RAPs and woodland accepted ag practices for woodland. And we're trying to work a deal where that doesn't come back from the House, but I wouldn't bet the farm on it. But we've got a crew. So we tried to slow it down in the Senate, but it was a foregone conclusion.
It's Senate Bill 146, in case you.
Ryan came over and testified against it, and I mean, we've got the RAPs where they're working pretty well, and try to get a study crew made up of the working group. So, why would we want to change that? Because we can update it if it needs updating, but we still got that at play somewheres over on the health side in the process. So that's where we are with that. So anyways, thank you for your time and
Thank you.
all the stuff that you've had to provide us with all winter and hopefully we'll still have some hair on our heads when we get out of here.
Some of us.
I'm nervous about the camera angle myself.
Sorry, Steve.
Yeah.
You are so bad. We are so bad.
Yeah, as Bobby likes to say, I think we used you pretty well this year. I like that expression a lot.
Well, my stepfather used to say, God only made so many perfect heads and the rest he covered with hair.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Have a great
Thank
week.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Are you ready to? I think he's here.